Hey everybody, it's Cory from CoryBakerFilmmaker.com, and I just saw Us, written, directed by Jordan Peele. So first things first, before we get into the review and all that sort of stuff, I wanted to share some exciting news. I've decided that I'm going to start producing audio versions of this to be released as a podcast as well. So if you don't have the opportunity to come check out the YouTube every single week and see what the latest review is, you can subscribe to the Cory Baker Filmmaker Film Review Podcast on all the different podcast apps. The only one that's not available right now, I believe, is Apple Podcasts, so stay tuned for that. It's going to be coming soon. But for all other podcatchers, you can find it right there. I'd appreciate it if you subscribed. Thank you so much. On to the review here. I saw this movie at the Studio Movie Grill, which I've gone to a couple times before, but now they finally have the in-seat dining and the whole they're done with all their renovations. The chairs are nice. It was a really great experience, and it didn't break the bank either. They had like a 2 for $29 appetizer and 2 entree thing that Rachel and I split, and that was really good. Lots of food. They provided lots of food. But yeah, it was a wonderful time and definitely worth checking out, especially because on Tuesdays it's $5 a night, and that's hard to beat no matter where you live. On to Us, and to give you guys a heads up at the top, I'm going to avoid spoilers as much as humanly possible while doing the actual review, and then after I've done the leaderboard and the sign-off, then I'll give you a couple minutes of my thoughts, spoiler-wise, at the end. So if you don't want to see that part, you can just cut out before. Otherwise, we'll go right into the review without me trying to spoil anything that you wouldn't already know from the trailer. Basically, we have this sort of like 2 timeline thing going on here, where we have Adelaide as a kid and Adelaide as an adult. Adelaide as an adult played by Lupita Nyong'o. It sort of details her in Santa Cruz on the beach, going into like this funhouse mirror place and running into an exact replica of herself. At first, we're made to believe that perhaps that it's the reflection from the mirrors, but as the real Adelaide turns around and sees the other version of herself, we realize that it's not a reflection and that it's 2 separate people. Fast forward to her as an adult with her husband Gabe and her 2 kids, Zora and Jason. They are now going to Santa Cruz, and once she hears that they're going to be returning to Santa Cruz, Adelaide gets really nervous. They have some fun on the beach, and then all of a sudden this shadow family that looks exactly like them, except for wearing like red jumpsuits and gloves and having scissors, come, and yeah, chaos ensues from there. One of the first things I would say about Us is that while many people would be categorizing it as a horror movie, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's like a horror movie in the same sense. I mean, it's not as... being scary is not the top of this movie's list. And while it has like a couple jump scares and it's more psychological than I think most horror movies are these days, it's very much more like a thriller than it is a horror movie, if you will. And that's not to take anything away from it. I honestly, I think that Jordan Peele is probably the best we have in this horror genre right now. And it almost feels like we're losing the ability to get better Jordan Peele films because they're still sort of in this horror genre. It's like you being a very talented singer and saying, I want to win a gold record really bad. I need that. I need to sell as many albums as possible. So you become a Christian artist because it would be easier to get to a gold record than it would be if you were doing it in like rock and roll or pop or anything like that. And that's kind of how this feels sometimes. It's just like Jordan Peele so far outclasses the rest of the people, that the rest of his peers in the horror genre, that I'd almost rather him be Nolan or something like that and try and like make whatever legitimate film he wants. And obviously he's going to do what he wants. This is what he wants to do, but this like he should have the right to step up and try new things. And I think that Us is just another step along his filmmaking journey after the runaway success of Get Out. So a lot of why I'm sort of saying that Jordan Peele is outclassing the competition a bit here is cross department, everyone was doing fantastic work. The thing was shot beautifully. It sounds great. The editing was wonderful. The production design was wonderful. Costuming, everything. Like it feels whole cloth. Like it was a idea that sort of just flew surreptitiously through Jordan Peele and all to the people below him. And that's the best version of any movie, is when it feels like it's just sort of like one person who's got their hand on the wheel and guiding the whole thing, and then it's 50 cars that are all following behind, and it's just trying to keep it in line. I would especially like to say that it's the lighting in particular really stuck with me. I think that they did a fantastic job lighting this, and it's something that with a largely African American cast, there has been problems in the past of certain TPs and other people in G&E to properly expose somebody with darker skin, and in this movie it kind of leans into it well. So it not only are they dealing with those parameters going in, but they use the darkness of the area around and the scene that's being set up to really create these wonderful, like, high contrast, just very scary feeling. Like just being able to see somebody pop out and only being able to see the whites of their eyes and an otherwise black, just like dark shot is really great. And if you were to look at this film without any sound on, which is always a nice a way I would recommend that some people see some of these movies. But try and watch it a little bit without sound and see if you can still pick it up. It's very visual. You wouldn't have to necessarily hear anything to be able to understand what's going on in this movie. And that's a great success to the way that it was put together. On top of all that, the acting in this thing is just first class pretty much the whole way through. I would not be surprised if Lupita Nyong'o or Elisabeth Moss got some sort of nomination for this film, because they are really great. It's early in the year. It's hard to say who will be amongst the top 5 in either a Best Actress or Best Supporting Actress role. But I think both of them have an early odds-on favorite to get nominated for sure. Elisabeth Moss, just in particular, there's a masterclass in acting with your face that's going on there. And just across the board, because the family is the one that we get to see interact with their shadow people the most. And it's Lupita Nyong'o acting against herself. And I was trying to explain to people this is part of what I think the excellence of Jordan Peele is really coming through, because it's so hard. You come in day one of shooting, maybe you're shooting scene 30 in the way, and it's Lupita Nyong'o, and it's Adelaide going up against Red, the shadow version, and you have to perfectly know what this is going to look like when it comes time to edit it, and you have to be so sure of yourself. And as an actor, it's so hard to just sort of like open yourself up to an open-ended, like you're not getting to act against the person that you're really going to be acting against in the film, and it's way more difficult than it is. If this is a scene just between Lupita Nyong'o and Winston Duke, then, you would maybe only have the camera on one of them at a time, but you would have the other person there to work off of. When you're working against yourself, it's just so much more difficult, and you got to have so much more trust in the people who are watching this to make sure that it's going the right way. And they just really nailed the hell out of it, and it's an incredible feat. It's just when you step in knowing how difficult these things can be, it adds a layer of complexity to it that you wouldn't have unless you realized how absurdly difficult this whole thing was. Time for me to grab my scissors and cut on right down to the leaderboard. Again, saw this movie at Studio Movie Grill. Recommend. Would definitely go back. Check out it if you have the chance, especially on a $5 Tuesday. Hard to beat. Onto the movie leaderboard. You know, when I started this thing, I would have the Fast and the Furious leaderboard for movies that are like, oh, this is clearly dumb, but we need to be able to express how much fun you have at the theater, even if the filmmaking aspect of it doesn't live up to the same level as other movies, which is why I would do separate ratings for certain things. And horror movies, to a degree, I feel like sort of lay in the same sort of thing. It's hard for you to explain exactly how much fun and how well done it is, because the genre can hold it back a little bit. I mean, like, just horror movies are not particularly seen as like high art kind of thing, but Jordan Peele does what he does and takes this to another level. It's a really good movie. I don't know if it's an award nominee per se, but if I had to give it a review, or if I had to give it a rating, I would give Us an 8.3. Really well done. Enjoyed it thoroughly. Would like to see it again. And I guess we'll just sort of see what kind of time I have to be able to do that. If not, I'll have to wait until turns to home video, if you will. But that's it from me. If you want more, you can go to my website, CoryBakerFilmmaker.com, Facebook.com/CoryBakerFilm, at LegendsCB5 on Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat. Please let me know if there's anything that you want me to see and do a review of. Harmony Korine's new flick is out. I'm thinking about checking that out. Would love to tell you all about that. I love Spring Breakers, along with a lot of other Harmony Korine movies, you know, but be sure, if you haven't already, to subscribe to the Cory Baker Filmmaker Film Reviews podcast, available on all the podcatchers except for Apple at the moment, but will be shortly. And yeah, stay tuned for the review, or stay tuned for the spoilers if you want them. Otherwise, all right, time for spoiler time. Even though I'm going to get into spoilers over here, I just don't want to go too deep. I feel like so much of this movie is about the conversation that you would have afterwards, and with that launching into like a huge long thing, it's hard to really touch all the bases. But here's sort of some overall thoughts. I get where Jordan Peele is trying to lead us. I mean, so early, as soon as the Shadow family first starts coming in, Red says that they're Americans, and that one really hit hard, because there's sort of this thing about, like, you know, like there's sort of like a social justice thing, a capitalism thing going on here, where it's like for every success that you have on one side, you're going to have somebody who fails on the other, and they're going to have somebody who you know, for every person who makes $1 million, there's somebody who can't eat at night, and that's sort of what feeling there is between, like, people on the surface and people in the underworld, with like the Hands Across America stuff and all the it feels like any argument that I started rolling myself into about, like, what this movie is really about, and what, like, the chief things that Jordan Peele wants us to feel on the way out, was very inch deep, mile long, rather than being like a mile deep on any particular subject. It feels like he's trying to cover a lot of different things within the same framework of what he's set up here, and to make it work for different aspects of, you know, social justice and capitalism and commercialism and everything like that. It's just, it feels like, rather than being specific, he wanted to make it a little bit bigger, and that's fine. But then you start rolling down the possibilities of what he's trying to get at with this film, and it just loses itself after a little while. I sort of talked about this with the Favorite, with Yorgos Lanthimos, and how I think I would have had more enjoyment sitting down with Yorgos Lanthimos and talking to him about all the different things that he was doing trying to make that movie than I did actually watching the movie. And I don't feel that same way with Us. I think that Jordan Peele does a really good job of giving us the piece and allowing us to come to our own conclusions and work through it on our own way. But I do sort of feel like there's a missing aspect of this, which is I just don't entirely... He hits us on the head a couple times with things like Americans, and, we feel things on the bottom that you feel on top. Yeah, I got it. But it doesn't really, doesn't all connect as well as I'd like it to. It doesn't feel like M. Night Shyamalan, for instance, where he has a twist, and everything that he does is sort of setting up to a very specific theme and point. That's just not the same way that it goes here, and it's not to the detriment of the film, but it's like I probably would have ended up thinking this film was a lot better if there was just a little bit more this is definitely where I'm leaning into, as opposed to I'm just sort of trying to hit a bunch of spots with the same sort of aesthetic. Anyway, thank you for checking out the spoilers. If you want to talk more spoilers with me, feel free. Just hit me up on Twitter or anywhere else. I'd love to talk to you about it. But that's it. If you don't mind, I have an exact replica who's trying to kill me, and I really should take care of that.